All right, class, welcome back. We are finishing chapter 6. This is the second half. They just got into the French trenches. They were able to take provisions, get some food, some cognac, that alcohol, and now they're back in their trench. The evening benediction begins. A benediction is a blessing, and by the way, I'm on page 118. Okay, so the evening blessing begins. Night comes, out of the craters rise the mists. It looks as though the holes were full of ghostly secrets. The white vapor creeps painfully round before it ventures to steal away over the edge. Then long streaks stretch from crater to crater. So we get this image of nighttime and like this foggy mist is slowly creeping across the cratered and broken earth. It is chilly. I am on sentry, on watch, and stare into the darkness. My strength is exhausted, as always, after an attack, and so it is hard for me to be alone with my thoughts. They are not properly thoughts. They are memories, which in my weakness haunts me and strangely moves me. The parachute lights soar upwards, and I see a picture, a summer evening. I am in the cathedral cloister and look at the tall rose trees that bloom in the middle of the little cloister garden where the monks lie buried. So he's having a flashback here. He's in a cathedral, so we see like a churchyard. Around the walls are the stone carvings of the Stations of the Cross. No one is there. A great quietness rules in this blossoming quadrangle. The sun lies warm on the heavy gray stones. I place my hand upon them and feel the warmth. At the right-hand corner, the green cathedral spire ascends into the pale blue sky of the evening. Between the glowing columns of the cloister is the cool darkness that only churches have, and I stand there and wonder whether, when I am 20, I shall have experienced the bewildering emotions of love. The image is alarmingly near. It touches me before it dissolves in the light of the next star shell. I lay hold of my rifle to see that it is trim. The barrel is wet. I take it in my hands and rub off the moisture with my fingers. Between the meadows behind our town, there stands a line of old poplars by a stream. They were visible from a great distance, and although they grew on one bank only, we called them the Poplar Avenue. Even as children, we had a great love for them. They drew us vaguely thither. We played truant the whole day by them and listened to their rustling. We sat beneath them on the bank of the stream and let our feet hang in the bright, swift waters. The pure fragrance of the water and the melody of the wind in the poplars held our fancies. We loved them dearly, and the image of those days still makes my heart pause in its beating. So he's remembering as a child the fun they had. They'd skip school. They would be truant, that means skip school, and they'd go to these poplar trees and they'd sit with their feet in the stream. A lot of very peaceful, relaxing imagery in that paragraph. It is strange that all the memories that come have these two qualities. They are always completely calm. That is predominant in them. And even if they are not really calm, they become so. They are soundless apparitions that speak to me with looks and gestures silently, without any word. And it is the alarm of their silence that forces me to lay hold of my sleeve and my rifle, lest I should abandon myself to the liberation and allurement in which my body would dilate and gently pass away into the still forces that lie behind these things. They are quiet in this way because quietness is so unattainable for us now. At the front, there is no quietness, and the curse of the front reaches so far that we never pass beyond it. Even in the remote depots and rest areas, the droning and the muffled noise of shelling is always in our ears. We are never so far off that it is no more to be heard, but these last few days it has been unbearable. So no matter where they go, they hear the front. Even if they actually aren't close enough to hear it, it's still there in their minds, the constant noise. Their stillness is the reason why these memories of former times do not awaken desire so much as sorrow, a vast, inapprehensible melancholy. Once we had such desires, but they return not. They are past. They belong to another world that is gone from us. In the barracks, they called forth the rebellious, wild craving for their return, for then they were still bound to us. We belonged to them and they to us, even though we were already absent from them. They appeared in the soldier songs which we sang as we marched between the glow of the dawn and the black silhouettes of the forest to drill on the moor. They were a powerful remembrance that was in us and came from us. But here in the trenches, they are completely lost to us. They arise no more. We are dead, and they stand remote on the horizon. They are a mysterious reflection, an apparition that haunts us, that we fear and love without hope. They are strong, and our desires strong, but they are unattainable, and we know it. So all those that's repeated in there, that's referring to the memories of peace and calm, completely gone now. And even if these scenes of our youth were given back to us, we would hardly know what to do. The tender, secret influence that passed from them into us could not rise again. We might be amongst them and move in them. We might remember and love them and be stirred by the sight of them. But it would be like gazing at the photograph of a dead comrade. Those are his features, and it is his face, and the days we spent together take on a mournful life of the memory, but the man himself, it is not. We can never regain the old intimacy with those scenes. It was not any recognition of their beauty and their significance that attracted us, but the communion, the feeling of a comradeship with the things and events of our existence, which cut us off and made the world of our parents a thing incomprehensible to us. For then we surrendered ourselves to events and were lost in them, and the least little thing was enough to carry us down the stream of eternity. Perhaps it was only the privilege of our youth, but as yet we recognized no limits and saw nowhere an end. We had that thrill of expectation in the blood which united us with the course of our days. Today we would pass through the scenes of our youth like travelers. We are burnt up by hard facts. Like tradesmen, we understand distinctions, and like butchers, necessities. We are no longer untroubled. We are indifferent. We might exist there, but should we really live there? We are forlorn or lonely like children, and experienced like old men. We are crude and sorrowful and superficial. I believe we are lost. And once again, what theme is that supporting? If you look at your theme chart, we had 4 themes that we're tracking. This whole section here, think about which one that is supporting. My hands grow cold and my flesh creeps, and yet the night is warm. Only the mist is cold, this mysterious mist that trails over the dead and sucks from their last creeping life. By morning they will be pale and green and their blood congealed and black. So again, this personification, the mist being like some creature that's sucking the life out of what's left of the dead and dying. Still the parachute rockets shoot up and cast their pitiless light over the stony landscape, which is full of craters and frozen lights like a moon. The blood beneath my skin brings fear and restlessness into my thoughts. They become feeble and tremble. They want warmth and life. They cannot persist without solace, without illusion. They are disordered before the naked picture of despair. I hear the rattle of the mess tins and immediately feel a strong desire for warm food. It would do me good and comfort me. Painfully, I force myself to wait until I am relieved. Then I go into the dugout and find a mug of barley. It is cooked and fat and tastes good. I eat it slowly. I remain quiet, though the others are in a better mood, for the shelling has died down. The days go by, and the incredible hours follow one another as a matter of course. Attacks alternate with counterattacks, and slowly the dead pile up in the field of craters between the trenches. Remember, between the trenches, we call that no man's land. We are able to bring in most of the wounded that do not lie too far off, but many have long to wait, and we listen to them dying. For one of them, we searched 2 days in vain. He must be lying on his belly and unable to turn over. Otherwise, it is hard to understand why we cannot find him, for it is only when a man has his mouth closed close to the ground that it is impossible to gauge the direction of his cry. He must have been hit badly, one of those nasty wounds, neither so severe that they exhaust the body at once and a man dreams on in a half swoon, nor so light that a man endures pain in the hope of becoming well again. Cat thinks it has either a broken pelvis, he has either a broken pelvis or a shot through the spine. His chest cannot have been injured, otherwise he would not have such strength to cry out. And if it were any other kind of wound, it would be possible to see him moving. He grows gradually hoarser. The voice is so strangely pitched that it seems to be everywhere. The first night, some of our fellows go out 3 times to look for him, but when they think they have located him and crawl across, the next time they hear the voice, it seems to come from somewhere else altogether. We search in vain until dawn. We scrutinize the field all day with glasses, but discover nothing. On the second day, the calls are fainter. That will be because his lips and mouth have become dry. Our company commander has promised next turn of leave with 3 days extra to anyone who finds him. This is a powerful inducement, but we would do all that is possible without that, for his cry is terrible. Cat and Crop even go out in the afternoon, and Albert gets the lobe of his ear shot off in consequence. It is of no purpose. They come back without him. It is easy to understand what he cries. At first he called only for help. The second night he must have had some delirium. He talked with his wife and his children. We often detected the name Elise. Today he merely weeps. By evening the voice dwindles to a croaking, but it persists still through the whole night. We hear it so distinctly because the wind blows toward our line. In the morning, when we suppose we must already have long gone to his rest, there comes across to us one last gurgling rattle. The days are hot, and the dead lie unburied. We cannot fetch them all in. If we did, we should not know what to do with them. The shells will bury them. Many have had their bellies swollen up like balloons. They hiss, belch, and make movements. The gases in them make noises. The sky is blue and without clouds. In the evening it grows sultry and the heat rises from the earth. When the wind blows toward us, it brings the smell of blood, which is very heavy and sweet. This deathly exhalation from the shell holes seems to be a mixture of chloroform and putrefaction, and fills us with nausea and retching. The nights become quiet, and the hunt for copper driving bands and the silken parachutes of the French star shells begin. So what they're looking for, these copper driving bands, they're the metal, a metal band around the bullet. If you look at a really tiny bullet, I'd imagine some modern bullets still have it. It would be like really small, but on the really big shells, they might be like this big around, depending on the size of the shell. These bands they're looking for. Why the driving bands are so desirable, no one knows exactly. The collectors merely assert that they are valuable. Some have collected so many that they will stoop under the weight of them when we go back. So they're not really sure why, but people want them, and they're able to collect them and sell them to others. But Hai at least gives a reason. He intends to give them to his girl to supplement her garters. At this, the Frisians explode with mirth or laughter. They slap their knees. By Jove, though, he's a wit. Hai he is, he's got brains. Jardin especially can hardly contain himself. He takes the largest of the rings in his hand and every now and then puts his leg through it to show how much slack there is. Hi, man, she must have legs like, his thoughts mount somewhat higher. And a behind too she must have, like an elephant. He cannot get over it. I wish I could play hot hand with her once, my hat. Hai beams, proud that his girl should receive so much appreciation. She's a nice fit, he says with self-satisfaction. Okay, so when he talks about to supplement a girl's garters, before, like, we had nylons, which are those like really sheer things that women wear. They kind of make their legs look more tan or whatever. Nylons or pantyhose, we call it. Before then, before we had the style we have now that are almost like tight, they were like socks, and you had to hold them up somehow. So women would wear garters, which just like if you've ever been to a wedding and the guy takes the garter off the woman, it's that elastic thing where she's wearing high up on her thigh. Well, women would wear those on both legs, and there would be straps, and the strap would go from the garter down to the top of the stocking. And that's what would stop the nylons from being pushed down and wrinkling. Men would wear them too with really nice dress pants. They would wear garters as well because they would have their dress socks held up by them. So we get some comedic relief here because these copper bands can be really, really big, and they're making jokes about the size of Hai's girlfriend if her leg is that big around. So comedic relief, we call that. A really, really tense situation, and then your author is going to bring in something to relieve that tension. Okay, we just saw horrific descriptions of that man dying for 2 days in no man's land, and then of the awful smells of all the dead people in no man's land. So we bring in a little bit of laughter to kind of ease the tension for the reader. The parachutes are turned to more practical uses. They're also collecting the silk from the parachute. According to the size of the bust, 3 or perhaps 4 will make a blouse. Crop and I use them as handkerchiefs. The others send them home. If the women could see at what risk these bits of rag are often obtained, they would be horrified. Cat surprises Jardin, endeavoring with perfect equanimity or calmness to knock the driving band off of a dud. If anyone else had tried it, the thing would have exploded, but Jardin always has his luck with him. So to get one of these metal bands, there's a dud is an unexploded bomb. And if you hit an unexploded bomb, you could set it off unless it truly is a dud and something's broken inside. But he does normally you avoid those. You call in the bomb squad to deactivate the bomb. But he just takes his hammer or pickaxe or whatever and knocks it off. One morning, 2 butterflies play in front of our trench. They are brimstone butterflies with red spots on their yellow wings. What can they be looking for here? There's not a plant nor a flower for miles. They settle on the teeth of a skull. The birds, too, are just as carefree. They have long since accustomed themselves to the war. Every morning, larks descend from no man's land. A year ago, we watched them nesting. The young ones grew up, too. So we have some juxtaposition here, okay? You have this beautiful image of a butterfly. Where does it land? On the teeth of a skull. So life and death, side by side for contrast. And we get this image of, while humans are destroying themselves, life goes on, nature goes on with the birds and the butterflies. We have a spell from the rats in the trench. They are in no man's land, we know what for. They grow fat. When we see one, we have a crack at it. At night, we hear again the rolling behind the enemy lines. All day, we have only the normal shelling so that we were able to repair the trenches. There is always plenty of amusement. The airmen see to that. There are countless fights for us to watch every day. Battle planes don't trouble us, but the observation planes we hate like the plague. They put the artillery to us. A few minutes after they appear, shrapnel and high explosives begin to drop on us. We lose 11 men in one day that way, and 5 of them stretch bearers. 2 are smashed so that Jardin remarks he could scrape them off the wall of the trench with a spoon and bury them in a mess tin. Another has the lower part of his body and his legs torn off. Dead, his chest leans against the side of the trench. His face is lemon yellow. In his beard still burns a cigarette. It glows until it dies out on his lips. We put the dead in a large shell hole. So far there are 3 layers, one on top of the other. Suddenly the shelling begins to pound again. Soon we are sitting up once more with the rigid tenseness of blank anticipation. Attack, counterattack, charge, repulse. These are words, but what things they signify. We have lost a good many men, mostly recruits. Reinforcements have again been sent up to our sector. They are one of the new regiments, composed almost entirely of young fellows just called up. They have had hardly any training and are sent into the field with only a theoretical knowledge. They do know what a hand grenade is, it is true, but they have very little idea of cover, and what is most important of all, have no eye for it. A fold in the ground has to be quite 18 inches high before they can see it. Although we need reinforcement, the recruits give us almost more trouble than they are worth. They are helpless in this grim fighting area. They fall like flies. Modern trench warfare demands knowledge and experience. A man must have a feeling for the contours of the ground, an ear for the sound and character of the shells, must be able to decide beforehand where they will drop, how they will burst, and how to shelter from them. The young recruits, of course, know none of these things. They get killed simply because they hardly can tell shrapnel from high explosive. They are mown down because they are listening anxiously to the roar of the big coal boxes falling in the rear and miss the light piping whistle of the low spreading daisy cutters. They flock together like sheep instead of scattering, and even the wounded are shot down like hares by the airmen. Their pale turnip faces, their pitiful clenched hands, the fine courage of these poor devils, the desperate charges and attacks made by the poor, brave wretches who are so terrified that they dare not cry out loudly, but with battered chests, with torn bellies, arms and legs only whimper softly for their mothers and cease as soon as one looks at them. Their sharp, downy, dead faces have the awful expressionlessness of dead children. So we see here these new recruits, they're just not battle ready and they just don't know how to act. They haven't experienced the awfulness enough to know what to do. It brings a lump into the throat to see how they go over and run and fall. A man would like to spank them, they are so stupid, and to take them by the arm and lead them away from here where they have no business to be. They wear gray coats and trousers and boots, but for most of them the uniform is far too big. It hangs on their limbs, their shoulders are too narrow, their bodies too slight. No uniform was ever made to these childish measurements. So think about that. Why are the uniforms not fitting? What do you think is happening in Germany that's causing uniforms, standard issue uniforms, to not be fitting? Between 5 and 10 recruits fall to every old hand. A surprise gas attack carries off a lot of them. They have not yet learned what to do. We found one dugout full of them with blue heads and black lips. Some of them in a shell hole took off their masks too soon. They did not know that the gas lies longest in the hollows. When they saw others on top without masks, they pulled theirs off too and swallowed enough to scorch their lungs. Their condition is hopeless. They choke to death with hemorrhages and suffocation. And a hemorrhage is a bleeding. So bleeding, in this case, internally in their lungs. So connect that back to the poem we read, Dulce Decorum Est, with the gas attack and the horrible, tragic death. In one part of the trench, I suddenly run into Himmelstas. We dive into the same dugout. Breathless, we are all lying, one beside the other, waiting for the charge. When we run out again, although I am very excited, I suddenly think, where's Himmelstas? Quickly, I jump back into the dugout and find him with a small scratch lying in a corner, pretending to be wounded. His face looks sullen. He is in a panic. He is new to it too, but it makes me mad that the young recruits should be out there and he here. Get out, I spit. He does not stir. His lips quiver. His mustache twitches. Out, I repeat. He draws up his legs, crouches back against the wall, and shows his teeth like a cur. I seize him by the arm and try to pull him up. He barks. This is too much for me. I grab him by the neck and shake him like a sack. His head jerks from side to side. You lump, will you get out? You hound, you skunk, sneak out of it, would you? His eyes become glassy. I knock his head against the wall. You cow. I kick him in the ribs. You swine. I push him toward the door and shove him out head first. So think about that. Himmelstas reacting the way that he does. Why might Remarque have chosen to do that? Why might our author have chosen to take their corporal, the one who trained them, and remember how he treated all of them and have him react in this way? Another wave of our attack had just come up. A lieutenant is with them. He sees us and yells, forward, forward, join in, follow. And the word of command does what all my banging could not. Himmelstas hears the order, looks around him as if awakened, and follows on. I come after and watch him go over. Once more, he is the smart Himmelstas of the parade ground. He has even outstripped the lieutenant and is far ahead. Bombardment, barrage, curtain fire, mines, gas, tanks, machine guns, hand grenades, words, but they hold the horror of the world. Our faces are encrusted. Our thoughts are devastated. We are weary to death. When the attack comes, we shall have to strike many of the men with our fists to waken them and make them come with us. Our eyes are burnt. Our hands are torn. Our knees bleed. Our elbows are raw. How long has it been? Weeks, months, years? Only days. We see time pass in the colorless faces of the dying. We cram food into us. We run, we throw, we shoot, we kill, we lie about. We are feeble and spent, and nothing supports us but the knowledge that there are still feebler, still more spent, still more helpless ones there who, with staring eyes, look upon us as gods that escaped death many times. In the few hours of rest, we teach them. There, see that waggle top? That's a mortar coming. Keep down, it will go clean over. But if it comes this way, then run for it. You can run from a mortar. We sharpen their ears to the malicious, hardly audible buzz of the smaller shells that are not easily distinguishable. They must pick them out from the general din by their insect-like hum. We explain to them that these are far more dangerous than the big ones that can be heard long beforehand. We show them how to take cover from aircraft, how to stimulate a dead man, how to simulate a dead man when one is overrun in an attack, how to time hand grenades so that they explode half a second before hitting the ground. We teach them to fling themselves into holes as quick as lightning before the shells with instantaneous fuses. We show them how to clean up a trench with a handful of bombs. We explain the difference between the fuse length of the enemy bombs and our own. We put them wise to the sound of gas shells, show them all the tricks that can save them from death. They listen, they are docile, but when it begins again, in their excitement, they do everything wrong. So think about earlier in the book. Paul discusses a lot of things that they were taught in school, and then a lot of the things that they were taught when they signed up. And he said they taught us all the wrong things. And now Paul and his men are trying to teach the new recruits all the things that they need to know to save them. High Vestus drags off with a great wound in his back through which the lung pulses at every breath. I can only press his hand. It's all up, Paul, he groans, and he bites his arm because of the pain. We see men living with their skulls blown open. We see soldiers run with their 2 feet cut off. They stagger on their splintered stumps into the next shell hole. A lance corporal crawls 1.5 miles on his hands, dragging his smashed knee after him. Another goes to the dressing station, and over his clasped hands bulge his intestines. We see men without mouths, without jaws, without faces. We find one man who has held the artery of his left arm in his teeth for 2 hours in order not to bleed to death. The sun goes down, night comes, the shells whine, life is at an end. Still the little piece of convulsed earth in which we lie is held. We have yielded no more than a few hundred yards of it as a prize to the enemy, but on every yard there lies a dead man. We have just been relieved. The wheels roll beneath us. We stand dully, and when the call, mind, wire, comes, we bend our knees. So this is remembering back to, I believe it was chapter 4, when they're on the trucks going to lay the barbed wire, and when they're coming home, back from the front, the mind, wire, they have to kneel down every time someone says that. It was summer when we came up. The trees were still green. Now it is autumn and the night is gray and wet. The lorries stop. We climb out, a confused heap, a remnant of many names. On either side stand people, dark, calling out the numbers of the brigades, the battalions. And at each call, a little group separates itself off, a small handful of dirty, pallid soldiers, a dreadfully small handful, and a dreadfully small remnant. A remnant is just a tiny piece that remains of something. Now someone is calling the number of our company. It is, yes, the company commander. He has come through then. His arm is in a sling. We go over to him and I recognize Kat and Albert. We stand together, lean against each other, and look at one another. And we hear the number of our company called again and again. He will call a long time. They do not hear him in the hospitals and shell holes. Once again, second company, this way. And then more softly, nobody else? Second company? He is silent, and then huskily he says, "Is that all?" He gives the order, number. The morning is gray. It was still summer when we came up, and we were 150 strong. Now we freeze. It is autumn. The leaves rustle. The voices flutter out wearily. 1, 2, 3, 4, and cease at 32. And there is a long silence before the voice asks, "Anyone else?" and waits, and then says softly, "In squads," and then breaks off and is only able to finish, "Second company," with difficulty. "Second company, march easy." A line, a short line, trudges off into the morning. 32 men. So out of 150, there are 32 men left in their company. It says they went up to the line in the spring. They've come back in autumn. So roughly 4, 5-ish months have passed. And then we see that one of their own, High Vestus, is gone now. He has died. All right, that is the end of chapter 6. Thanks for watching and following along.